Okay. Um, this is the beginning of a new lecture. It's about the nervous system. So what are we going to learn about it? So basically, this is an extension from our cell physiology. So in our cell physiology, we talk about the cell membrane and they talk about the membrane potential, and we talk about that every cell has a negative membrane potential. However, some cells can generate action potential. And those cells which can generate action potential, we call them excitable cells. And a very typical excitable cells are neuronal cells. So it's a good connection, good like extension after we talk about the nerve, after we talk about the cell physiology. So what are the nerve? So when we think about the nerve, we basically know that nervous system is a system that our body connect these multicellular organisms. So your body is a multicellular organism. You have so many cells. You have these cells form an organs. They function all together as a group, as an organ, and you have multiple organ systems, and they have to communicate with each other, and they are all controlled by the uh, the nervous system. Our body used two mechanisms to control different organs or different cells. We either use wire, like the nervous system, or we may use the hormone chemicals to control our bodies. And so the nervous system is the wire that your body, basically all the cells are connected by this wire. And so you have a signal can communicate between cells, and all together, all of them will basically all integrated in the central nervous system. So here is the overall nervous system. As you can see that you have all this wire, and you have the brain and the spinal cord. This portion, we call them the central nervous system. In contrast, we also have the nerve that is outside of the brain and the spinal cord. We call these the peripheral nervous system. So what is the difference? The major difference here is that the central nervous system are the system that has multiple neurons, and these neurons do not talk to non-neurons. They talk to neurons. So all these nerves, they form five circuits. They only communicate with themselves. However, your nervous system has to communicate with the non-neurons. So we have the peripheral. So what are the non-neurons? Basically, we have two groups of non-neurons. One is that those environment signal. So your nerve has to communicate with the environment signal, so your body know what's going on in the environment. And so we call those nerves are sensory nerve. So these sensory nerves are nerve. They will detect the environment. They will provide you the vision, provide you the touch, provide you the temperature, provide you the hearing, test. So those are the sensory nerve. They will detect the environment, and then they send signal into the central nervous system. And so you can get an understanding, you can get an appreciation of what's going on in the world. So that's the sensory. We also has the nerve that communicates non-neuron, communicate with non-neuron. Those are the motors, nervous system. Those are the nerve that talk to muscles in order to do action. So you have the sensory, talk to the environment. You also have the nerve that talk to muscle. So you can do response, so you can have an action. And so those nerves talk to non-neuron. What are non-neuron? The muscle cells. those talk to muscle cells are the motor nervous system, motor neurons. And so you can see that we have the peripheral, these serve the agents in a way that go out there and pick up the information from the environment and also gather the information from the brain spinal cord. And then when we have an action, they will be transmitted by the motor neurons to talk to muscle, and then you have the action. So that's overall the nervous system. You need to know that they are peripheral, they are central, and also in the peripheral, we basically have the afferent signal coming from the outside in or bottom up. This afferent signal are the sensory. Let me write it. Afferent. Afferent nervous afferent pathway. These are the ones that bring the information from the peripheral into the central. I'm supposed to move it, right? I'm supposed to move it, yes, sensor. And also we have the top down from the central to the environment. Those are the efferent pathway right here. Efferent. So basically it's just one letter. The only difference is one letter, afferent and the efferent pathway. So that's that. So that's the whole system. And we will talk about basically in the very first section, we will talk about the basic concept about the neuronal cells, their major components. And then we will look into the sensory. There are many sensory we can talk about. And then we will look into the motor. So basically, we probably will have 3 to 4 short video to talk about all this. So let's begin by the very first one, the cell. So what's the components of these nervous system? The major player of this nervous system are nerve cells. Nerve cell. So this is typical nerve cell. There are many types of nerve cell, but the one that we are most focused on are the neuronal cells. So these are the neuronal cell. And this is a typical neuronal cells. First of all, you need to know that this cell is excitable. So that's a unique part. It generates action potential. And so what are the components of this cell? You have the cell body, and the cell is not just circle or sphere. It has a long extended cell body to form axon. It also has extended cell body to form dendrites. What are the difference between dendrites and axons and the soma? Cell body is also called soma. Here it's nucleus. Nucleus, it contains the chromosome. So what's the difference between these processes? The different process is the difference of these processes, axon, dendrite, or cell processes. The difference between axon and the dendrites is that dendrites receive signal. So other signal will send to dendrites and the soma, gather this signal together here in this dendritic somatic portion. And then in the beginning of the axon, or also called axon hillock, this beginning or initial segment of the axon, this one will generate action potential. And then action potential will travel from this initial segment of axon, travel all the way down to the axon terminal or terminal buttons. So that is the difference. That is the how they work. So dendrites receive inputs. Let me show you another picture. Maybe this one helps. So here is another picture show you that here you have the soma, you have the dendrites, here is the axon. So you can see that from here you have the arrow indicates that these are the axon terminal from another neuron. These are axon terminal from another neuron. And so this one will send to the axon terminal. Axon terminal will reach out to the dendrites for the next neuron. So you can see that dendrites receive inputs, axons send out the action potential. And the action potential only travel along the axon from the beginning to the end. So that is the all this process work. So you can see that cell has many very widely spread dendrites in order to receive a lot of inputs. So they have a very spread dendrites depending on the location, different anatomy, different anatomical region may have different type of neuronal cells, but in general speaking, they all have very widespread, a lot of these dendrites to receive. And so that's how our brain function. When you remember one thing, like for example, you guys remember if this afternoon, right? You guys must remember your lunch, right? You must remember. It was not long ago, right? Or if it's noontime, you probably still remember what's your breakfast, right? And you remember things. How do you remember that? When you remember things, when you experience something, one of these circuits will get processed. Signal will go through here, say this is the phone number 1, number 2, something like that. It will go through here, go through this pathway. There are multiple pathways. There are millions or thousands of this pathway in your brain ready to get programmed. So when you remember something, one of these pathway get excited, one of these pathway get enhanced, and then you memorize it. And so how do you improve your memory? Repetition. So the more repeat you do with the same information or with the same action, you enhance that circuits. And so you can have a very faster response to that request, respond to that memory. So that is the difference between different dendrites and the axon. So that is a cell body, and as you can see that the cell doesn't work alone. So single neuron doesn't really have the function. The beauty of the nervous system is that they got to form a circuit. So one have to connect with the other. They got to form a network. So this is just an example that the cell have 1, 2, 3 inputs, but you can imagine that there are multiple. There are millions of thousands of inputs from millions of thousands of other cells. And single one will also extend into multiple output, multiple axon terminals. So that's that. As I mentioned before, that these cells, these neuronal cells can generate action potential. You guys remember action potential, right? If you don't remember, if you forgot, please go back to our previous lecture, the cell physiology, and over there we talk about the action potential. So what is you need to know about action potential is that, okay, it has depolarization, it has repolarization. You need to know what is the ion channel contribute to those different phases, depolarization phase, repolarization phase. You got to know those. And not every cells are excitable, but neurons is excitable. So when neurons receive different stimulus, this stimulus can be another neuron. As for the sensory, these stimulus can be your sensory signal. It can be your touch. Say you touch that. This is in your skin, for example, you touch it. Or this could be the smelling, the odor, the fragrant chemical binds on it to stimulate it. So the cell receives different stimulus. And then if that stimulus is high enough, is strong enough, it will cause this cell to generate action potential. You got to know that this cell is very long. Think about touch. So your finger can touch things. However, the cell can extend from your finger into your spinal cord. So that's that long. When you touch and your touch is strong enough, it generates action potential. And this action potential is electric signal, so it's very quick. It's just like flip your switch. You flip it, the whole room is lighting up, right? So it's just that quick. This action potential propagate from the initial segment of the axon to the axonal terminal. When they reach to the axonal terminal, they will reach to the next neuron. They do not physically contact with the next neuron. So they will release neurotransmitter. We call this region a synapse. Later we will talk about synapse, but just keep in mind that we will talk about it. So they will release neurotransmitter and using that chemical to transmit signal from one cell to the next. And this cell is very long. So throughout the way, it's an electric signal conduction, and between cells, there are chemical signal transduction. So that's that. And so here is an example that, okay, so this is action potential. And what I show you here is that the stimulus has to be strong enough. For example, if the stimulus is only 4 inputs, it's not strong enough. Just very much like when I talk to you, right? The voice has to be, you guys are sensitive, so you can hear me. But if I very quiet, right? If it's so quiet that you cannot hear me, even though I still make voice, right? Even though your nerve got stimulus, but it's not strong enough, it will not generate action potential. 4 doesn't generate, 8 doesn't, but 16, for example, 16 firing, synapse firing. So for example, like here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 is not strong enough, 8 is not strong enough. But if you have 16, all 16 of them say, wake up, this nerve, wake up. Then you wake up, it generates action potential. When it generates action potential, it will be depolarization and repolarization. And this, where is action potential? It's on the membrane. It's on the cell membrane. So it's right here. So it's on the cell membrane. Here, action potential, it will be on the cell membrane. It will flip this resting membrane potential to be neutral, to be a little bit positive, right? So in the resting, it's negative. It's negative. Show here. It's negative. In the resting, the membrane potential is negative. But when you turn on, when you activate it, when you generate action potential, the membrane voltage become positive, and then it will propagate from the initial segments of the axon toward the axonal terminal. So this is action potential. All right, and we call this action potential an impulse. So that's just another way of saying it. When we see that action potential propagate, that impulse propagate, it's the same thing. It's an action potential, is a moving one. It's not just stationary action potential. It's just not just one location. It propagate. So you generate it. Once you generate it, it will propagate throughout and to the axon terminal. Neuronal cells does it. However, throughout the brain development, we are not satisfied with only neurons to conduct that action potential. It's because even though it's very fast, it will transmit from initial segment to the axon terminal. However, when we are getting like a kind of big, right? Like our body size is not just single neuron level. This transduction need to be faster. So we can do quicker response. Like when you touch something sharp, you can withdraw your finger, right? So you don't get hurt. So you got to have some mechanism when you to respond to the sensory or the signal transduction. So the way that our body has to improve this signal transduction is to have another setup that is we wrap it around by myelin sheaths. So that's right here. So this is the nerve that we talked earlier. It has the soma, it has the dendrite. Now you have the axon terminal. But look at this axon terminal. It's not just bare, it's not just naked. Axon. It's wearing something on top of it. This is very much like your wire, your like a electric wire, right? Like and you see them all wrapped by some plastic thing on top of it. Yeah, you don't want to get shocked by that electric, but it improves the signal. So the electric does not get leaked, right? So we have the same thing in our nerve. We have wrapped it by another lipid stuff. So this is the membrane from a cell. This cell, we call them myelin cells. So this is called myelin sheath. Myelin sheath right here, myelin sheath. So we have the axon. Not every axon is myelinated, but we have some very important axons. Most of the axons are actually all myelinated. There are only very few example that's not myelinated, but most of the myelin axons are myelinated. So these are myelinated axons. And that, why do we need that? It makes this transduction much faster. So let me show you that we go back to these slides later, but let me show you this transduction difference. So here is axon transduction without myelin. So without myelin, your transduction has to travel every piece of the membrane in order to transduct that. So from here, from the central, you have to go through it in order to spread the action potential. And it takes time. It also takes energy. You also have the risk to lose the signal because it's bearing. There's no protection. This electric signal can easily get leaked out. So you lose that signal. If this wire is so long, you quickly lose it. So it's very unstable. What we do is that we wrap it by several myelin sheaths. So this transduction can be jumping from one location to the next. It can increase the conduction speed by about 5 to 50 fold. So it increases it a lot. So we can have faster and a more reliable signal transduction or signal transmission from axon initial segment of the axon to the axon terminal. We call this transaction a saltatory conduction. Basically, it means I jump through above through this myelin sheath. We didn't really talk about these details, but this region is called nodes of Ranvier. We don't need to know that much. Here, nodes of Ranvier. Okay, here we go. So it jumped through the nodes of Ranvier, and so it makes the transaction much faster. And so that's the myelin. This myelin is not part of the nerve. This is part of another cells. And so these are the cells who does it. So you can see here is one cell. This is nucleus. So this cell basically spread very thin. And it spreads so thin and then it wrap around these axons. So that's that. We have two types of myelin cells. One is called Schwann cells. We can see these Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system. So basically that these neurons, these axons here, these blue line, these axons are all wrapped by Schwann cells. In the central nervous system, these axons are wrapped by another type of the myelin cell. They are oligodendrocytes right here. So so that's two different kind of myelin cells. and their phenotypes are different. They are all part of the neural cells, nervous cells, but their phenotypes are different. In the peripheral, this is a typical peripheral Schwann cells. Single neuron will wrap around one axon. But in the central nervous system, these oligodendrocytes will group a lot of axons together. So this is very much like enhance a bundle of the fibers, a bundle of different fibers. So in our brain, in our spinal cord, these fibers are all grouped together. Then who groups them? These oligodendrocytes. They group them together. There are several advantages. Just very much like your just like very much like your house or the city. You know, when there's any like lines or like a pipe, right? We all try to group them together in a designated location. We all group them. It's not like spread everywhere. We group them together. Why do we do that? One advantage is to enhance their durability, especially in the central nervous system. We don't want them to get broken down. If it's just single one, it will be easier to get tear apart. We cannot uh, suffer from that in the brain and spinal cord, in the central nervous system. So we group them together, make this fiber, even though each one is so thin, but we group them together to improve their durability. So here is that the quiz question could be that what are the Myelin cells in the peripheral? That would be a Schwann cell. What are the Myelin cells in the central nervous system? That's the oligodendrocytes. And what do they do? Location and function. Now you know the location, the function. What do? They improve the impulse propagation speed, improve this transmission speed. So you can see that that's that. When these action potential travel to the axonal terminal, that is the end of the nerve. So right here. So action potential travel to the axonal terminal, that is end of it. But it has to communicate with the next neuron. As I talked earlier, that this communication to the end, this is the end. Axonal terminal, that's the end. But when they have to communicate with another neuron, another cells, right here, they have to communicate with another cells. So what is this communication detail? So we call these conduction, this communication pathway from axon terminal to dendrites. We call this part a synapse, and we are going to look into these synapses. These, as I mentioned earlier, here they don't have physical conduct. So your action potential, your electric signal will stop here. And then how do the next neuron know that, okay, there is a signal coming over? This one will release chemical. Then chemical diffuse over to touch on the next neuron. And so that's how they communicate from the one cells to the next. So these synapses are communicated by chemical. And these chemical are called neurotransmitter. So let's look at this synapse. Synapse right here. So here is synapse has two parts. One is a presynaptic site, and this is part of the axonal terminal, part of another cells, right? Another neuron. Action potential travel down here to the end. Action potential when you travel down to here to the end, it would opens a calcium channel. This calcium channel will allow the axon terminal to release chemicals. The chemicals are called neurotransmitters. There are many different kinds of neurotransmitters. Later, we will learn about acetylcholine, norepinephrine. Those are the typical neurotransmitter when we talk about the motor system, motor neurons. And there are so many other glutamate, that's the excitatory, GABA, that's the inhibitory, dopamine, serotonin. There are so many different kind of neurotransmitters, but their mechanisms are the same. So the action potential travel to the axonal terminal. Now is the dead end. There is a cleft. So there's opening. Action potential cannot jump over. No, they cannot. It's not something that they can jump over. They will release neurotransmitter, and a neurotransmitter will diffuse over, filling this space. They will bind on the receptor in the post-synaptic site. And so when post-synaptic site receive those receptor, the postsynaptic site will generate action potential, and then it can transmit signal further on. So that is the synapse. So synapse is the space, is a unique combination of to communicate between one neurons to the next cell. This next cell can be neuron, but can be muscle cells. So if this is the motor neuron, it will release neurotransmitter to act on muscle. If this is another nerve, then it will release neurotransmitter to act on it, and this will be another neurons. So, but this basically synapse is the place that one cell, one neuronal cell, sends signal to the next cell, and you got to have action potential coming to the end. Nerve will is excitable, so action potential coming down to the end. Presynaptic side release neurotransmitter. Postsynaptic side has the receptors to receive neurotransmitter. So that's how they communicate. And that is the very fundamental concepts about the nervous system. We talk about the general overall nervous system, central versus peripheral, sensory versus motor, and then we look into the neuronal cells. We look into the different cellular components, and then we talk about the action potential. We talk about the synapse, and that is it. And then let's take a break, and then we will move on to the next portion. That will be the sensory nervous system.